Hello, my name is Matthew Loskamp, and today I'll be presenting how economies of scale can be used in business strategy. This presentation was created by myself, Emily Caro, Lexi McIsaac, Haley Onifaro, and Tim Jeffrey Martell. So what are economies of scale? Economies of scale are a situation where a firm can increase its output more than proportionally to its total input costs. To put it simply, as output increases, cost per unit decreases. This occurs through division of labor, mathematical relationships in factory size and volume, and large-scale technology such as assembly lines. This graph shows how economies of scale affect a firm's cost. As output increases, the firm's average total cost, ATC, per unit begins to decrease. The two factors in this decrease are the average fixed cost, AFC, and average variable cost, AVC. AFC declines as the firm is able to spread its fixed cost, those that remain constant like factory leases, across more units. Average variable cost declines as a firm is able to gain negotiating power with suppliers, engage in greater division of labor, and more effectively use its capital. Eventually, as a firm grows too large, these factors reverse, with bureaucracy and management complexity increasing the average total cost of production for a firm. Along with economies of scale comes a learning curve. The learning curve says that as a firm's knowledge increases, it's able to produce units at a lower average cost per unit across the entire production curve. While this is relevant in all industries, it is most relevant in knowledge-intensive industries such as aircraft manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, and companies that use complex decision algorithms such as Amazon to predict a consumer's preferences. An understanding of economies of scale is essential to crafting business strategy. Firms that operate in industries with high economies of scale are able to gain absolute cost advantages over new entrants in order to limit competition. Companies with high fixed costs also need to understand how changes in output or demand will affect their profitability. Firms which pursue a low-cost strategy need to operate at minimum efficient scale, the point with the lowest production cost per unit, in order to establish a competitive advantage. Lastly, the number of firms and how they compete is strongly related to the shape of the industry's average total cost, average fixed cost, and average variable cost curves. This graph shows how minimum efficient scale and market demand affect the number of firms within an industry. Looking at ATC1 on the left, we can see that minimum efficient scale occurs at an output 100th the market demand. Firms operating within this industry, assuming free entry and exit and little differentiation between offerings, will only be able to compete at minimum efficient output or risk being undercut by their competition. As a result of this cost structure, this industry will support approximately 100 individual firms. A similar situation exists on ATC2, and with a minimum efficient scale of 1/10 the market demand, there will be just 10 firms in this industry. There's a different story for ATC3. This would result in a monopoly emerging as the incumbent firm would have a significant absolute cost advantage over new entrants. An example of an industry with this structure is utilities. The cost of establishing a network to distribute power is so great that in most areas there is only a single firm in the market. The government chooses to regulate these single firms as they can provide the consumer with a lower cost than under a competitive market, and by regulating, they prevent monopoly pricing. An industry that exhibits low economies of scale is the laundromat industry. As the facility and even the machines themselves can be leased, there are small startup costs and small fixed costs in comparison to most other industries. Further, as customers operate the machines themselves, there are also few variable costs. Even those variable costs that exist are largely unaffected by the number of customers using the facility. As a result, we can see many independently owned laundromats as a large chain is unable to establish a lower cost position than a new entrant. That this industry's target market is also less well off financially. This leads to significant price competition. The graph to the right shows how the ATC curve for this industry is much flatter than the ATC curve in an average industry due to these factors. Fast food restaurants, on the other hand, exhibit high economies of scale. For example, McDonald's is able to produce a Big Mac so cheaply as through their huge purchasing volume, they are able to get the lowest cost per unit from their suppliers. Further, they spend vast amounts on R&D to develop food products that have a long shelf life and to make the equipment used in their restaurants produce food quickly and efficiently. To use these advantages to their full effect, McDonald's needs to have an incredibly large output to make up for its fixed costs and to maintain the lowest cost from its suppliers. Yet we still see many smaller restaurants around as instead of competing against McDonald's on price, they are able to generate a higher willingness to pay from customers from a high-quality dining experience. When analyzing business decisions, it is important to remember that a firm does not have a single economy of scale, but an economy of scale in every business activity. Looking at the activities in logistics, marketing, accounting, and legal, it's clear that while many large firms have these activities in-house, many other firms outsource them. This is because being able to operate at minimum efficient scale is one of the key components behind the make-buy decision for a firm. So even while Amazon sells a huge amount through its online store, it still chooses to have UPS ship its products as they don't have the volume to achieve minimum efficient scale and distribution. The second component of the make-buy decision is if it can generate higher willingness to pay from the customer. This reduces the importance of achieving the output of minimum efficient scale. In conclusion, when looking at a firm or an industry, it's important to consider how they are shaped by economies of scale. Industries with high fixed costs will have a much greater incentive to compete on price, as any revenue above their variable costs will contribute to paying off their fixed costs. A firm able to establish a position with high economies of scale is able to defend against new entrants and use its low cost as a competitive advantage against other established firms. In all cases, firms should be careful, and especially so when considering mergers, of increased complexity and bureaucracy, as these can lead to diseconomies of scale and the increasing cost per unit that comes along with it. As we've seen, economies of scale affect all industries from laundry to McDonald's, and it should always be a factor in analyzing business decisions and strategy.